Just the other day, I posted a video comparing the multitasking, and maybe you could say broadly the productivity features of the Pixel 9 Pro Fold as well as the Galaxy Z Fold 6 and the OnePlus Open. I think it's fair from my comparison to say that the Pixel 9 Pro Fold does indeed fall behind in terms of the sheer number of features available. Today in this video though, I want to dig a little bit deeper into this apparent feature gap, explore it a bit more, and talk about why I think Google has approached things the way that they have. I think that for this subject, though, it's going to be helpful to zoom out a little bit and not just focus on those productivity features, but talk about the overall feature set in general when we're comparing the Pixel to some of these other devices. In this instance, for this video, we're going to focus on Samsung. You can say that OnePlus is very much the same, but I think that for this topic, they are almost sort of a light version of Samsung. We're going to look at the two extremes, which I think are Google Pixel and the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold devices. And the reason I say these are the two extremes is because I would say that the Pixel has the fewest total overall features, and the Samsung Galaxy phones have the most total overall features. OnePlus falls somewhere in the middle. I'm not saying that they're worse or better. We're not making that distinction for this part. All I'm saying is most features and probably the least number of features. Hopefully my reasoning for focusing in on this particular thing will make sense as the video goes on. I don't think I'm saying anything crazy when I say that one of the defining characteristics of a Samsung Galaxy phone is the sheer number of features that Samsung throws at you. It's honestly sometimes a little bit overwhelming how many things these phones are capable of doing, and that is the Samsung approach. They treat you the most like you are an admin. They give you every possible thing that they can think of. They even give you apps like Good Lock to further customize, to further tweak things. They just throw everything at you. Now, I will say that their skin of Android, much like OnePlus and many other Chinese OEMs, does feel a little bit sterilized to me. Hopefully you know what I mean by that. When I compare it to something like a Pixel that feels kind of very bouncy and colorful and playful, Samsung's phones do have this very minimal or maybe almost like a corporate feel to them. I'm not sure if I'm communicating this correctly. Hopefully you know what I mean. It feels like a work phone. When you drill down though and you start to really compare the features that Samsung focuses on and the features that Google tends to focus on, where they diverge, I think that you can start to understand where they diverge in terms of their thinking. And through that, we can kind of start to figure out why Google is doing what they're doing. I think really often people look at certain things like features missing and they say Google can't do that because they haven't. And I think that that's really, really silly. There's virtually nothing on a Samsung phone that Google could not implement on a Pixel phone. They just have chose not to. So I think we have to ask the more interesting question and talk about why they haven't, right? So on a Samsung phone, you can split screen with 3 applications plus a floating window. On a Pixel phone, you only have access to 2 split screen apps, and then you can do, just the generic Android app picture-in-picture, like YouTube can be minimized, and it has a little pop-up picture-in-picture thing that all Android phones can do at this point. That's all you have. Samsung devices have a full desktop interface with Samsung DeX, and while it does seem like Pixels are going to be finally picking up something similar in the not-so-distant future, obviously, Samsung has had this for years and years. It has not been a priority for Google. So what has been a priority for Google? Well, it's kind of complicated because really, really often Google pioneers a feature on the Pixel devices and then it rolls out to pretty much everyone, or Samsung is able to implement it as well. So you have to kind of look at what the Pixels got first to determine what Google is truly prioritizing. And I think that when you start to do that, what you'll start to see is that while Samsung seems to prioritize features that are based around getting things done, giving users more and more power, Google seems to focus on features that are more novel. Things are going to change the way you use your phone. They're not just going to give you some generic editing controls in their Photos app. They're going to give you things like Magic Eraser and then things like Magic Editor. Things that now everyone is beginning to copy because it fundamentally changed the way that we actually handle photo editing on our phones. How about fundamentally rethinking how wallpapers work on your phone by giving you the ability to generate wallpapers on the fly? It's one of my favorite new Pixel features, and of course, Samsung has picked it up as well. And you could go on and on with this, right? There's features like Now Playing, features like call screening, new stuff like Pixel Studio or stuff inside Gboard like Assistant Typing and Grammar Check, on and on and on. This seems to me to be the biggest distinction between the way that Google approaches things and the way that Samsung approaches things. Samsung is all about empowering the power user, and that may genuinely speak to you in a very real and deep way. Google seems to be much more intent on changing the way that we use our phones in sort of revolutionary ways, much in the way that I feel like early Apple was. And I think that that is sort of at the heart of this. Google, with their Pixel phones, are indeed trying to channel Apple much more than Samsung is. Rather than taking existing concepts and improving them, which Samsung is phenomenal at, they're trying to think of brand new concepts and deliver those to your phone. And personally, just speaking for myself, when I go through and I make a list of all the Samsung features I can think of that are on the Galaxy devices, and then I think of all of the Pixel features that are available, I find that I end up using more of the Pixel features. Now that, again, is just me. If you're even more of a power user, you may use more of those things. But I, just as an example, only ever really want to use two apps side by side. I never want to have a third app open. Very rarely. Maybe a couple times a month when I'm daily driving a Z Fold or a OnePlus Open style device. Now, I will say, floating windows, that's something I probably use a few times a week, so I'd absolutely love to have that. But the point that I'm trying to draw here is that I don't think as many people use these power user features as you may be thinking. Let's call back here to an article from 9 to 5 Google back in May. This is a little bit of a snippet from a Google I/O event where Google revealed 47% of Pixel Fold users were using split screen mode. That shocked me because to me, that seems exceptionally low. Surely if you're buying these devices, you're going to be using them for multitasking. That just seems logical and reasonable to me. But according to Google, that's just not the case. These Pixel Fold users are not necessarily the heavy power users that you may be thinking that they are. I would wonder what percentage of Samsung users are using a third application. If less than half of Pixel Fold users are using two apps side by side, I would guess that it is a vanishingly small number of people. Now, of course, you could say there's probably a difference in who is buying both phones. Maybe Samsung, through their reputation and through their long-standing support of power user features, maybe they draw in power users more, and maybe Z Fold users do split screen more than Pixel Fold users. And you're probably going to be right about that, but I don't think it's going to be a radical difference. Like, I don't think it's going to go from 47% for the Pixel and like 80% for Samsung. I would love to know how many people on these Samsung devices are using three apps side by side and exactly how often they do that. I would still guess that it's probably a fairly low amount of people, and I wonder if we had the data to extrapolate out what percentage of people are using some of the more niche power user features on Samsung devices versus features like Magic Editor or call screening on the Pixel devices. You could also definitely say that when you're buying a Fold-style device, that inherently those buyers are going to be more of a power user than people just buying regular phones. And I think that's probably fair also. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Google shouldn't be pursuing power user features for their phones, in particular their tablets and folding phones. We should have the option to have a third app if we want to do that. We should absolutely have a floating window. The bigger thing that I'm trying to kind of point you towards, the point I'm trying to make, is that I think that there is a radical difference in the general philosophy, the strategy behind Google Pixel phones and Samsung Galaxy phones. Samsung Galaxy phones are for the power user. That's what Samsung is targeting. That's who they're targeting. Whereas for Google and Pixels, I think that they're going for a very different group of people. We've all watched Apple be unbelievably successful for years and years while omitting features that a lot of Android users think are just basic, maybe you would call them power user features. They've focused on other things and they've been unbelievably successful while doing that. That is what I think Google is trying to do. Whether or not they have been successful at that, whether or not they're going to be successful at that, is an entirely different subject, and you can have your own answer to that. But I do think that's what they're trying to do, maybe with their own Google spin put on it. I think that maybe the best example of Google's Apple-like approach is the fact that with these folding devices, you can only have one layout. On Samsung devices, you can have a distinct layout for your cover display, totally different. And then when you open it, have another completely distinct, totally different layout. Google says, this is fine. Your tablet screen is just going to be your first 2 pages. This is good. This is how we're doing it, and this is how you're doing it. Whereas for Samsung, they give you the choice. You can do it either way you want. I must admit that for me, it absolutely has been effective. I do gravitate towards Pixel devices because of their software approach. I use more of these features than I do Samsung Galaxy features. I like the way that these devices look and feel, the animation, the style. I just like this user interface, and I like Google's approach. You can absolutely disagree because you're a different person and you have different things that you prioritize. I would love to hear about that, though, in the comments down below. Do you appreciate Google's approach? Do you appreciate Samsung's approach? Do you think I'm crazy with this entire analysis? Let me know in the comments down below, guys. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.